The night opens around you like a velvet curtain, dark and heavy, sprinkled with stars that shimmer like scattered gold dust. You breathe in, slow and steady, and the air feels cool, like the pause before a storm or the hush before a secret is told. Tonight isn't just about lying back and drifting, it's about discovering which divine spark hums inside you. And yes, don't panic, no thunderbolts will strike your pillow, probably. You probably won't survive that, so let's keep the lightning safely in the story. Before we set foot on this Olympian path, let's do the important YouTube thing. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop a comment with your location and the local time. I love seeing how far across the world these nights reach, like tiny constellations stitched together in our little community. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You wander in a quiet dream, the kind where nothing really makes sense, yet it all feels perfectly natural. Ahead, a marble staircase rises, gleaming under moonlight, each step wide and smooth as if it's been polished for centuries. The air tastes faintly of salt, as though the sea has drifted inland to greet you. You start climbing, each footfall silent. It's not tiring, dream logic has taken care of that. Instead, it feels like each step lifts you closer to something waiting, something ancient. At the top of the stairs, a vast arch opens into a hall, pillars stretching so high you can't see where they end. Torches burn along the walls, but the flames don't flicker, they stay unervingly still, as though frozen in time. The hall isn't empty, though. You feel the hum of presence, many presences, like 1,000 eyes pressing lightly against your skin. The Olympian gods are awake, curious, and apparently, about to judge you. But it's not judgment in the scary, courtroom sense. No, this feels more like an elaborate game show, except with immortals. You half expect Zeus to spin a giant wheel of fortune, Hera to throw some shade about your outfit, and Hermes to crack a joke from the sidelines. You realize you're not just here to watch. You're here because Olympus wants to know which of them you are most like. Are you thunder, or sea, or moonlight? Are you love's glow, wisdom's edge, or the stillness of the underworld? The quiz begins, but it doesn't feel like a sheet of paper, it's woven into the space around you. Every step, every answer in your head, shapes the path forward. The first whisper comes soft and sly, as though carried on the wind. What do you crave most? Power, peace, or freedom? You laugh under your breath, because really, who starts a quiz with a life-defining question? But that's the gods for you, dramatic, impatient, and allergic to small talk. You think about it. Maybe you crave power, the kind that bends storms and commands respect. Or maybe it's peace, quiet mornings, golden fields, the kind of stability Demeter would approve of. Or freedom, moonlit wanderings, paths untied, the independence Artemis holds close. Your answer hums in the air, like a string plucked on an unseen harp, and the hall shifts. The torches ripple now, finally alive, and you notice symbols carved into the pillars. A thunderbolt here, a seashell there, an olive branch, a chariot wheel, even a delicate dove. Each one flickers faintly when your thoughts brush against it. You begin to realize the quiz isn't about ticking boxes, it's about walking through choices and seeing what glows in your wake. And here's a historical detail to anchor you in reality. In ancient Greek temples, worshippers often didn't enter the inner sanctum of the gods. They'd leave offerings outside, oil, wine, or small figurines, because stepping too close to divine space felt dangerous. In a way, you're doing the opposite. You've strolled right into the inner circle, uninvited, and instead of leaving an offering, you're offering yourself. Bold move. Somewhere to your left, you hear a chuckle. Hermes, probably. Or maybe it's Apollo, always amused by mortals playing with big questions. Scholars still argue whether these myths were meant to be strict lessons about morality, or just cozy fireside tales people told to pass the time. Right now, though, they feel alive, playful, and strangely invested in what you'll discover. As you continue, another odd detail comes to mind. Did you know that in some versions of mythology, the gods had golden ichor instead of blood? Imagine them gossiping about you with glowing veins, sipping ambrosia like it's a divine smoothie. It makes the whole situation feel more surreal, doesn't it? The marble beneath your feet grows warmer as you walk, and the hall stretches into something almost endless. You pass under one arch, then another, each marked with a symbol. You linger at each one, wondering, would Zeus's thunderbolt feel too heavy to carry? Would Hera's crown slip crooked on your head if you're not careful? Would Poseidon's trident clank annoyingly every time you set it down? These aren't official quiz questions, of course, but they're the ones your mind invents when it's half awake, drifting towards sleep. There's no rush here. The gods don't hurry, and neither should you. You're allowed to pause, to let your imagination wrap around the possibilities. Which part of you shines brighter, your clever wit, your stubborn loyalty, your flashes of temper, or your deep craving for beauty? The hall listens patiently, absorbing your thoughts like the night sky swallows starlight. For now, you simply walk, each step drawing you closer to the quiz's heart. Olympus waits, playful and watchful, ready to see which reflection will emerge. You're not just a visitor tonight, you're the story itself, and the gods are leaning in, eager to meet the version of you that has always been quietly divine. The air thickens with a hush, as if the marble hall itself leans forward, listening to the answers you haven't even spoken yet. It's not the kind of quiz where you bubble in A, B, or C with a dull pencil, it's more like a dream weaving itself around your choices. Every glance, every stray thought, seems to ripple outward, tugging at invisible threads. The first real question hangs in the air, bold and demanding. How do you face conflict? Your mind begins to weigh the possibilities. Do you charge straight in like Ares, all fire and fists? Do you scheme like Athena, turning strategy into an art form? Or maybe you avoid conflict altogether, slipping into shadows like Hades, preferring calm silence over noisy confrontation. The question lingers, not for judgment, but for self-recognition. You step past another column, and this one glows with a faint olive branch, the symbol of peace. You wonder, do you choose peace because it's noble, or because it's easier than fighting? Scholars still argue whether the olive branch was originally Athena's gift to Athens, or if it was borrowed later from older Mediterranean cultures. Either way, it stuck. Funny how something as simple as a leafy twig became shorthand for ending wars. A soft laugh echoes nearby, teasing but not unkind. Hermes again? Probably. You picture him jotting down your choices on an invisible clipboard, wings on his sandals twitching impatiently. Another mortal trying to make sense of themselves, he might be muttering. But isn't that what all quizzes really are? Just a mirror dressed up in fancy words, trying to trick you into noticing parts of yourself you usually ignore. The next whisper comes, what do you value most, family, ambition, or independence? The hall flickers with three glowing symbols. A crown for family loyalty, a blazing torch for ambition, and a crescent moon for independence. You hesitate, because honestly, you could argue for all three on different days. Maybe you're loyal until someone pushes too far. Maybe ambition burns in you when you're overlooked. Maybe independence calls the loudest when the noise of the world becomes unbearable. The gods don't expect a single neat answer. They thrive on contradictions. After all, Zeus was ambitious and unfaithful, Hera was loyal but fiercely jealous, Poseidon was powerful yet insecure. If the gods themselves were messy, why should your quiz answers be tidy? The marble path changes beneath your feet. It becomes mosaic now, tiny tiles pieced together into shifting patterns. One moment you're walking on waves, the next on lightning bolts, the next on vines. It's as if Olympus itself reshuffles, adjusting to the pulse of your thoughts. Here's a quirky detail for you. Some ancient Greeks believed gods would disguise themselves as animals or strangers just to test mortals. Imagine Zeus pretending to be a grumpy old man asking for directions, or Athena showing up as a raven perched nearby. You start to wonder, what if your own choices here are being watched not by grand, glowing deities, but by subtle presences in the corner of your vision? Maybe that flicker by the torchlight isn't just a trick of the eye. The quiz presses on, weaving dream questions between your steps. Do you lead with your head or your heart? Would you rather create, destroy, or simply observe? Do you crave recognition, or does anonymity feel safer? Each question feels like it peels back a layer of you. Not to embarrass, but to reveal. It's almost soothing, like someone slowly, carefully turning a mirror until you see yourself from an angle you'd missed before. As you consider, the torches brighten for a moment, and you hear faint music. Strings plucked in a pattern that feels half familiar, half otherworldly. Apollo, maybe, reminding you that even quizzes can have rhythm. Each choice you make becomes a note in a song only you can hear. One thing scholars still debate is whether Greek myths were meant literally, gods with bodies striding across mountains, or symbolically, as archetypes of human behavior. In this glowing hall, it doesn't matter. What matters is how each god brushes against something inside you, stirring a reflection you didn't know was waiting. You catch yourself smiling at the absurdity. You're lying here, probably half-tucked under a blanket in real life, and yet your dream self is on Olympus, answering questions posed by immortal beings. It's ridiculous, and yet, there's comfort in the ridiculous. Like a bedtime story for adults, playful and profound all at once. The hall grows quieter, the quiz easing into a pause, letting you breathe. You sense the gods shifting, rearranging themselves, like the audience before the next act. Somewhere out there, the answers you've given already begin to sketch your divine resemblance. Lightning? Harvest? Love? Shadow? The whispers are circling, and soon, one god will step forward, curious to see if you belong to them. For now, though, you're still mid-journey, the test unfolding in the dark velvet of the night. The marble hums beneath your feet, a lullaby of stone and myth, carrying you deeper into the heart of Olympus's little game. The hush of the hall trembles, as though the air itself has been charged. A faint flash arcs across the ceiling, not lightning exactly, but something close, like a memory of thunder stitched into the night. You sense the weight of a presence, vast and impossible to ignore, and then the whispers turn into a roar of energy that makes the marble floor vibrate beneath your steps. Zeus has noticed you. You tilt your head back instinctively, and there he is, not standing in front of you exactly, more like his silhouette is etched into the sky above the hall. His form shifts with every blink, one moment cloaked in regal robes, the next a storm cloud crowned with fire. His eyes? They blaze with the unnerving intensity of lightning that hasn't yet decided where to strike. And yet, despite all that ferocity, you catch the faintest smirk, like he's secretly amused you've wandered into his orbit. Zeus doesn't speak in words at first. Instead, you feel questions thunder straight into your chest. Do you command respect, or do you demand it? Do you protect others, or do you control them? Do you rise with the storm, or become the storm itself? Your breath catches. You realize this is what it feels like to be tested by Olympus's ruler. The quiz isn't playful anymore, it's electrified. A memory floats up. In real history, the cult of Zeus was sprawling. His worship stretched from mountaintops like Olympia to distant colonies scattered across the Mediterranean. Wherever Greek culture traveled, Zeus traveled with it. He was the ultimate symbol of authority, both admired and feared. Scholars still argue whether Zeus was loved more as a caring father of gods, or feared as an untrustworthy tyrant. And honestly, both seem accurate. The guy wasn't exactly a role model husband, unless your definition of fidelity involves shape-shifting into animals and chasing mortals. That odd detail makes you snort softly. Imagine your high school personality quiz asking if you'd prefer to turn into a swan or a shower of gold. That's Zeus for you. Drama and chaos in divine form. As the storm light flickers, you wonder, do you share any of his traits? Maybe you've felt that hunger for authority, the urge to be the one steering the ship, making the rules, throwing down thunderbolts, metaphorical ones, of course. Or maybe your lightning is less about control and more about energy, your ability to walk into a room and shift its mood, like a storm front changing the weather. Zeus leans closer, or maybe it's just the ceiling lowering, it's dream logic, who knows. You sense him weighing your presence, testing if you hold your ground or shrink back. And you realize, standing here, that lightning isn't just destructive. It's illuminating. It shows everything in stark clarity, stripping away shadows for an instant. Maybe your lightning is the truth you speak, or the ideas you spark when others are still fumbling in the dark. The hall reacts to your thoughts. The torches flare brighter, the mosaics on the floor rearranging into jagged, flashing lines. Your answers glow like storm cracks, painting you in raw power. Still, Zeus's presence isn't without a sly edge. You sense the unspoken reminder, authority always has a cost. The Greeks themselves knew it. Too much power, and hubris, pride, creeps in. And hubris, in myth, always ends badly. Just ask the poor mortals who dared to rival the gods. Lightning wasn't just his weapon, it was his warning. Another whisper rises, this one playful, almost mocking, do you feel more at home leading or rebelling? And you realize, Zeus doesn't mind rebels, as long as he's the one still holding the thunderbolt. Maybe that's the catch, if you resonate with him, you carry both charisma and danger. You glance around, half expecting Hermes to pop in with popcorn, watching the drama unfold. Or Hera, arms crossed, muttering about her husband's wandering eyes. You smirk at the thought, if you end up being Zeus, in this divine quiz, you'd better be ready to handle some complicated family dinners. Still, there's something magnetic about the storm. You can't help but lean into it, just a little. Imagine if you could snap your fingers and command silence. If your voice could stop arguments mid-sentence. If your presence alone made people straighten their backs. That's Zeus energy. It's not subtle, but it is unforgettable. Lightning crackles again, this time closer, a streak splitting the hall before vanishing without harm. You feel the echo in your chest like a drumbeat. You realize the test isn't about whether you are Zeus, it's about whether you recognize the storm inside you, whether you own it or deny it. And here's the quirky twist, the Greeks believed Zeus could literally hurl bolts crafted by the Cyclopes. Imagine being so dramatic that your weapons require one-eyed blacksmiths in volcanic workshops. You can't help but grin, because if that isn't peak extra, what is? The storm light fades gradually, though the charge lingers in the air like static on your skin. Zeus steps back into the clouded heights, leaving behind only a faint rumble, as though he's filing away your answers for later. You exhale, realizing you've just walked through the thunder and come out intact. Maybe with sparks still clinging to you. The hall shifts again, mosaics softening into vines and golden wheat. A gentler presence waits ahead, one that smells faintly of hearth smoke and fields after rain. The storm has passed, but Olympus isn't done with you yet. The thunder fades into a low murmur behind you, like a storm rolling off into distant hills. The air grows warmer, calmer, touched with the fragrance of roses and hearth smoke. You step forward, and the floor beneath you softens into patterns of peacock feathers, glinting with iridescent blues and greens. The torches no longer crackle, instead, their flames burn steady, like watchful eyes. Hera is here. Her presence doesn't announce itself with noise or lightning. It arrives like a crown placed silently on your head, heavy, regal, impossible to ignore. You see her at the far end of the hall, seated on a throne carved from ivory and gold. Her gaze isn't stormy like Zeus's, but sharp, steady, and far more unsettling. Where Zeus tested your energy, Hera tests your loyalty. Her voice slides into the space around you, calm yet edged. Do you stand by the ones you love, even when the world mocks you for it? Do you protect loyalty at all costs, or do you let betrayal pass without consequence? You swallow. There's no joking here, no playful whisper. Hera doesn't waste words. She watches you like she's waiting for a slip, like she'll notice if your eyes dart nervously or your thoughts try to dodge the question. A historical fact drifts up in your mind. Hera was worshipped widely across Greece, often as the protector of marriage and childbirth. Temples in her honor were massive, second only to those of Zeus. Scholars still argue whether Hera was seen more as a nurturing figure or as a fearsome enforcer. And honestly, she was both. The goddess who blessed unions, and the goddess who punished unfaithful partners with a vengeance only a mortal rage could fuel. You can't help but think about that odd detail: the peacock was her sacred animal. Imagine being a goddess so tied to loyalty and pride that your symbol is a bird that struts around flashing its feathers like, "Look at me, I am unashamed." You almost chuckle. Hera would approve, but only if you're laughing respectfully. Her questions linger, heavy: do you forgive? Or do you keep score? And there it is, the core of Hera's energy. Not just love, but memory. She doesn't forget. She doesn't let slights vanish into air. If Zeus's thunder is sudden, Hera's power is patient, simmering like a slow fire that never burns out. You begin to reflect. Maybe you felt that part of yourself, the part that clings tightly to loyalty, almost fiercely, unwilling to let go even when others tell you to move on. Maybe you're the friend who doesn't just stand at someone's wedding but stays at their side years later, remembering the promises made. Or maybe, when wronged, you felt that whisper of Hera's energy, the refusal to accept betrayal quietly. The hall responds to your thoughts. The mosaics rearrange into wedding bands, into laurel wreaths, into flames that curl into rings. Hera's presence doesn't spark like Zeus, it steadies, grounding you in questions of who you truly stand for, and what you refuse to tolerate. You imagine for a moment what it would be like to live with Hera's intensity inside you. To feel every bond, every promise, tied to your ribs like golden threads. Maybe it's beautiful, knowing you're the keeper of loyalty. Or maybe it's exhausting, carrying the weight of everyone's vows. Another whisper rises: do you define yourself by who loves you, or by who dares to break you? You realize that Hera's test isn't about power, it's about resilience. About whether your loyalty is strength, or whether it traps you in anger. And here's the quirky thing: some myths say Hera's milk created the Milky Way itself when it spilled across the heavens. Think about that, galactic beauty, born from a goddess's breastfeeding accident. Cosmic wonder and motherly chaos, all rolled into one. You can't help but grin at the absurdity. Even the Queen of Olympus had messy moments. Hera studies you in silence, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. She doesn't smile, not really, but you sense a flicker of approval if you've stood your ground, if you've dared to admit that loyalty lives in you, even with its shadows. She lifts her chin, regal as ever, and the hall seems to bow with her. Then the air shifts again. The feathers on the floor dissolve into frothing waves, blue-green and restless, crashing faintly against invisible shores. You hear the low rumble of water, deeper than thunder, steady and endless. Hera retreats, but the sea itself rises to greet you. Poseidon waits ahead, and you know the tide of the quiz is about to change. The steady warmth of Hera's hall fades as the ground beneath you begins to tremble, not from thunder this time, but from the rolling rhythm of waves. A salty tang rises in the air, cool and sharp against your skin, and the mosaics under your feet dissolve into liquid patterns. One moment, marble. The next, rippling water that somehow supports you, carrying you forward. Poseidon has entered the scene. The hall widens into something vast and blue, as though the roof itself has melted into sky. Columns twist into coral, torches flicker into sea lanterns, and the faint cry of gulls drifts overhead. You feel a presence, immense and tidal, pressing in from all sides. Then, from the shifting waves, a figure rises, a tall man crowned with seaweed and silver foam, trident gleaming in hand. Poseidon's gaze is tidal, calm at first glance, but with storms hidden just beneath. He doesn't roar like Zeus or pierce like Hera. Instead, his voice feels like waves against rocks, endless, layered, wearing you down gently until you realize he's reshaped you. Are you calm waters or restless storms? Do you shelter, or do you drown? When your emotions rise, do they trickle or do they flood? You shift uneasily, because you know the truth, you've been both. Some days you're the calm bay, offering peace and safety. Other days, you're the crashing tide, breaking patience into splinters. Poseidon knows. He's lived both sides of the wave. Historically, Poseidon was second only to Zeus in influence. His temples dotted coastlines, his name whispered in prayers before every voyage. Scholars still argue whether sailors truly feared him as an angry god, or honored him out of gratitude for calm seas. Both make sense. Poseidon was protector and destroyer, depending on his mood. And here's an odd little detail: in some myths, he created horses from sea foam. Just picture it, frothy waves suddenly galloping onto the shore like a stampede of salty stallions. The Greeks were nothing if not creative with their metaphors. The trident gleams brighter, and you feel his questions deepen. What stirs inside you when you're ignored? Do you crash louder? Or retreat into hidden depths? Poseidon, after all, knew what it was to feel overshadowed by his brother Zeus. The second in command, the eternal contender. His anger often came not from hatred of mortals, but from the sting of being underestimated. You start to wonder, do you know that feeling too? Of being overlooked when you know you carry entire oceans inside? Maybe that's the storm in you, the crash that happens when you refuse to be invisible. The space around you shifts again. Waves swell higher, curling overhead like liquid arches. The sound isn't threatening, it's hypnotic, rhythmic, like a lullaby sung by tides. You begin to feel the pull of the sea in your own chest, the ebb and flow of emotions, the deep silence no one sees, the sudden crash of a storm that surprises even you. Poseidon leans closer, and his trident dips toward you. Not as a weapon, but as a mirror. The prongs glow with images of your past, times you've comforted others like a calm tide, and times you've erupted in sudden waves of temper. He doesn't scold. He doesn't praise. He simply shows you, you are both. And being both doesn't make you broken, it makes you oceanic. You find yourself smiling at the realization. Maybe you've always thought of your moods as inconvenient, messy, unpredictable. But here, in Poseidon's gaze, they're powerful. Necessary. The sea doesn't apologize for storms, and neither should you. Another whisper drifts from the waves: do you drift with the current, or do you carve your own tide? That's Poseidon's final question, the one that lingers. Because while the sea is vast, it's never truly still. Even silence has a current beneath it. And here's another quirky fact: some ancient Greeks believed Poseidon's anger caused earthquakes. Not storms, not waves, earthquakes. They called him Earth Shaker. Imagine blaming every crack in the ground on a god stomping his foot underwater. Somehow, it makes sense. His power wasn't just wet, it was everywhere. The sea begins to calm, waves receding into quiet ripples. Poseidon's trident fades into foam, and the salt air thins into something sweeter. Ahead, golden fields appear, stalks of grain swaying in a breeze that smells of bread, honey, and hearth smoke. The ocean recedes fully now, leaving only the faintest taste of salt on your lips. Poseidon sinks back into his watery throne, leaving you to step into the warmth of harvest light. Demeter is waiting, her patience and care already blooming in the path ahead. The last drops of salt slip from the air, replaced by something gentler, earthy, warm, alive. You take another step, and the floor beneath you no longer glistens like water but softens into soil, rich and dark, with shoots of green pushing through. The torches along the walls flicker, and their flames stretch upward into stalks of wheat, glowing golden against the night. You breathe in, and the air smells like freshly baked bread, ripe fruit, and fields after rain. Demeter is here. She doesn't arrive with thunder, nor with crowns and jewels, but with the quiet dignity of harvest itself. A figure forms in the shimmering light, a woman robed in green and gold, her hair flowing like stalks of barley in the wind. Her eyes are steady, kind yet fierce, the eyes of someone who has seen growth and loss, abundance and famine, and has carried it all with grace. Her presence settles around you like a mother's hand on your shoulder. There's weight in it, yes, but also comfort. Her first question rises softly, like a breeze moving through the fields: do you nurture others, or do you guard them too tightly? When you give, do you give freely, or do you fear being forgotten? You pause, because the question strikes deeper than you expect. Maybe you've been the one who feeds others, not with literal bread but with care, advice, patience. Maybe you've been the one people lean on, the one who always remembers birthdays, who shows up with soup when someone is sick, who quietly keeps the world turning. And maybe, like Demeter, you've also felt the sting of being taken for granted. A historical fact comes to mind: in Eleusis, near Athens, Demeter's worship was at the heart of one of Greece's most secretive rituals, the Eleusinian Mysteries. Thousands would gather in hushed ceremonies, promising secrecy about what they saw. Scholars still argue whether those rites were about promising life after death or simply honoring the cycles of agriculture. Whatever the truth, it shows how deeply Demeter's role as a giver of life resonated with mortals. And here's a quirky little detail: in one myth, Demeter once disguised herself as an old woman and worked as a nanny, trying to make a child immortal by placing him in the fire at night. The parents, understandably, freaked out. But the myth shows her desperation to preserve what she loves, sometimes with methods that look terrifying from the outside. Her voice stirs again: when someone you love drifts away, do you wait patiently, or do you stop the world until they return? And immediately, you remember the myth of Persephone, her daughter, stolen away to the underworld by Hades. Demeter's grief was so great that she stopped the earth from producing food, plunging the world into famine until a deal was struck to bring Persephone back part of the year. That's devotion in its fiercest form, love that reshapes the seasons themselves. You feel a pang, because maybe you know what that's like. Not literally causing winter, of course, but holding on to absence like it's carved into your chest. Maybe you've had times where the world dimmed until the person you loved returned. Maybe you've realized how much of your strength is tied to those you nurture. The soil under your feet shifts into patterns of vines curling into circles, endless loops of growth, death, and rebirth. Demeter doesn't test you with storms or threats, she reminds you of cycles. That giving and losing, blooming and fading, are part of what makes you human. Another whisper curls up from the golden stalks: do you measure yourself by what you grow, or by what you keep safe? It's not an easy question. Growth can mean pushing forward, creating, producing. Safety can mean protecting, preserving, defending. Both require sacrifice. Both are valuable. Demeter asks not for perfection, but for awareness. You glance at her again, at her calm and steady figure, and it hits you: Demeter's strength isn't in flashy displays. It's in persistence. In being the one who stays when storms pass. In carrying grief and still finding a way to coax green from the soil. That's a power less dramatic than Zeus's lightning or Poseidon's tides, but maybe more enduring. And here's the odd detail that lingers in your mind: ancient Greeks often offered her little pigs in sacrifice during harvest festivals. Imagine fields buzzing with rituals and, yes, piglets involved in the ceremony. Strange, almost comical, yet deeply symbolic of fertility and life cycles. It makes you realize how messy, even earthy, divine devotion really was. Demeter studies you quietly, and for the first time tonight, you don't feel judged. You feel understood. Like she's less interested in whether you match her perfectly and more in reminding you of something you've maybe forgotten: that even in loss, you're capable of growing new harvests. Slowly, the golden fields begin to fade, the stalks dissolving into shadows. The air cools, sharpens, and you hear the faint flutter of wings. An owl's call echoes, low and haunting. The mosaics shift into patterns of shields, spears, and books. The hall of Demeter narrows, sharpening into clarity. Athena is waiting in the shadows ahead, wisdom in her eyes and strategy on her tongue. The faint rustle of wheat fades into the cool hush of stone. You take a cautious step forward, and the air sharpens, like the inside of a library that doubles as a battlefield. The torches along the walls no longer glow in warm golds, instead, they shift into icy whites and pale blues. Shadows stretch long and straight, geometric, deliberate. And then you see her. Athena. She does not arrive with thunder or crops or crashing waves. She simply is, as though she has been waiting, arms crossed, eyes calculating. Her armor gleams like polished silver, and her owl perches nearby, unblinking, feathers catching the faintest trace of light. You notice that even her silence feels like a test, like she's already 3 steps ahead of you, measuring your every pause. When she finally speaks, it's not with tenderness. It's sharp, clear, like the strike of a blade. Do you act with strategy, or do you move first and justify later? The question makes you swallow. Because, let's be honest, you've done both. There are moments you've been reckless, leaping without a plan. And then there are moments you've been overly cautious, crafting elaborate schemes for things that, in hindsight, didn't really matter. Athena, though, is not here for your excuses. She waits. A historical fact slips into your mind: the Parthenon, the great temple in Athens, was built in her honor. It wasn't just a place of worship, it was a statement of identity. Athens tied itself to her name, her wisdom, her strategic clarity. Scholars still argue whether Athena was more goddess of war or goddess of wisdom, or whether those two roles were inseparable in the Greek mind. And here's a quirky detail: though she's a warrior, Athena was also the goddess of weaving. Yes, weaving. As in, spinning threads, creating intricate patterns. Think about it: strategy, whether in war or in crafts, requires foresight, patience, and precision. A battlefield map, a woven tapestry, both are designs of control. She tilts her head slightly, as if considering whether you pass her invisible test. When conflict comes, do you seek to win, or do you seek to resolve? It's a brutal question, because maybe you've been caught in those moments where winning mattered more than peace. Maybe you've sharpened your words like swords just to make sure the other person knew you were right. Or maybe you've avoided fights, calculating that some battles aren't worth the scars. Athena's gaze suggests both choices reveal who you are. The floor beneath your feet shifts, turning into a checkerboard of black and white tiles. It feels like standing inside a chessboard, every step a move, every move a consequence. You glance upward, and the ceiling resembles a giant war map, constellations lined like dots connected by lines, campaigns drawn across the stars. Oddly enough, you feel calm here. Even as the silence presses in, Athena's presence is less about intimidation and more about sharpening. She doesn't care if you stumble, she cares whether you learn. Her owl shifts its wings, and Athena asks again, when you face fear, do you charge, or do you plan? The way she says it, you sense she already knows your answer. Still, she lets you wrestle with it. Another historical fragment drifts in: Athena was born fully grown, springing from the head of Zeus after he swallowed her pregnant mother, Metis. Yes, that's the kind of myth where you stop and ask, wait, what? Scholars still argue whether this birth was symbolic of pure intellect, emerging from the mind, or if it reflected older myths where gods consumed wisdom to claim it. Either way, Athena's birth wasn't ordinary. She wasn't nurtured, she wasn't raised. She arrived, whole and brilliant. And maybe that's the real challenge she presents to you now. She's asking whether you can think with that same clarity, whether you can sharpen your instincts into wisdom instead of impulse. You notice something strange at your feet: one of the tiles glows faintly, as if urging you to step on it. When you do, a sound echoes, a clash of swords. But then another tile glows, and this time, stepping on it makes the sound of a loom, threads being pulled tight. War and weaving, conflict and creation, always intertwined under Athena's watch. She leans forward slightly, and for the first time tonight, her expression softens, not into warmth exactly, but into approval. As though acknowledging that even asking the right questions, even stumbling toward strategy, is enough for now. Here's the odd little fact she leaves you with: in ancient pottery, Athena is often depicted not fighting, but standing between fighters, holding them apart. Not ending war, not fueling it, but pausing it. It makes you wonder, is true wisdom not about charging or retreating, but knowing when to hold back the world itself? Her owl blinks, once, twice, and then spreads its wings, fluttering upward into the night ceiling. The checkerboard tiles fade, dissolving into soft, pale light. Athena steps back, blending into the shadows, leaving only the echo of her presence, clear, precise, demanding you to think. And then the air warms again. The faint, sweet scent of apples and wine seeps into the stone walls. Laughter echoes faintly, rich and unbothered, a reminder that life isn't only about strategy and storms. Ahead, a figure leans casually against a vine-covered pillar, smiling like he's been waiting for you to catch up. Dionysus. The checkerboard floor dissolves beneath your feet, and in its place grows a carpet of vines, twisting upward, heavy with grapes that glow faintly in the dim light. The air shifts from sharp and cold to thick and sweet, like the first sip of wine after a long day. Somewhere, faintly, music plays, a lyre? Maybe a flute? No, it sounds looser, wilder, the kind of music that doesn't follow rules but still makes your body want to sway. And there he is. Dionysus. He doesn't arrive with armor or solemnity. He reclines against a pillar wrapped in ivy, one hand lazily holding a goblet that never seems to empty. His hair curls untamed, his robe slips carelessly from one shoulder, and his grin suggests he knows secrets you'd never dare say out loud. Where Athena asked questions with steel, Dionysus asks with mischief, with temptation. Tell me, he says, voice rich and smooth, do you free yourself, or do you chain yourself with caution? It's not a question you expected, but it lands like wine warming your chest. Maybe you've spent your life trying to keep things controlled, measured, respectable. Or maybe you've already tasted recklessness and wondered if it was freedom, or a trap dressed up like it. A historical fact drifts in ancient Greece, Dionysus wasn't just about wine and revelry. He was central to dramatic theater, especially tragedy. Entire festivals, like the city Dionysia in Athens, were dedicated to plays performed in his honor. Scholars still argue whether his worship was about liberation from social norms or about controlled release, a safe space for chaos. Either way, he blurred the lines between order and ecstasy. Here's a quirky detail: in some parts of Greece, his followers, the Maenads, were said to run wild through the forests, dancing, screaming, even tearing animals apart with their bare hands in ecstatic frenzy. And yet, the same god who inspired that chaos also inspired the structure of theater, the balance of chorus, dialogue, and performance. Dionysus held both madness and art in one hand, laughing as if to say, why choose? His smile widens as he swirls the goblet. When you celebrate, do you let yourself go, or do you calculate how others see you? Ouch. Because maybe you've done both. Maybe you've stood stiff at parties, worrying about how you looked while others let loose. Or maybe you've had moments where you did let go, only to wake up the next morning wondering if you went too far. Dionysus doesn't judge, he only points out the chains you carry, whether they're locked tight or tossed carelessly aside. The vines at your feet twist higher, weaving into arches overhead. The sound of laughter swells, not cruel, not mocking, but genuine, contagious. You feel your shoulders loosen, your breath deepen. For the first time tonight, the air doesn't demand answers. It tempts you into feeling. And maybe that's the lesson. Dionysus leans closer, eyes gleaming. When sorrow comes, do you bottle it, or do you spill it out in song, in laughter, in tears? His voice is velvet but piercing. He's not asking whether you party hard. He's asking whether you allow yourself to be human, to grieve loudly, to celebrate without apology, to exist without always packaging yourself neatly. Oddly, you remember an ancient depiction of him as a beardless youth, delicate, almost feminine, holding a wine cup with grace. In others, he appears older, bearded, wild-eyed. Two faces, two extremes, one God. Maybe that's the point, you contain multitudes. You're not just your serious side, or your messy side. You're both, woven together like ivy. The music swells again, and suddenly you're in the middle of a hall that feels alive. Grapes burst with light on the vines. The air hums with joy and danger at once, as though you could lean forward and fall into bliss, or into chaos. Here's an odd fact you can't shake. Some ancient Greeks believed Dionysus died and was reborn over and over again, torn apart by titans and pieced back together. A cycle of destruction and renewal, like the human spirit itself. And scholars still argue whether his myth was imported from the East or whether he was always part of Greece's roots. Either way, his story reminds you that letting go doesn't mean ending, it often means beginning again. Dionysus raises his goblet toward you, a toast not of demand but of invitation. For once tonight, you're not being judged, measured, or tested. You're simply being asked to live. To taste. To loosen. The vines curl back, slowly, gently, as if they've given you enough for now. The laughter fades into echoes, the music into silence. And in the quiet, you hear something steadier, more grounded, a rhythmic pounding, like a heartbeat beneath the earth. The air thickens, earthy and dark, as though stone itself is preparing to rise. Ahead, a shadow waits, broad and unyielding, carrying both warmth and unshakable severity. The underworld is stirring, and Hades is about to make his presence known. The laughter fades, like the last echo of a festival in the distance. In its place comes a silence so complete it presses against your chest. The air cools, not the sharp cold of Athena's clarity, but a deep, still chill, the kind that seeps from caverns untouched by sunlight. The vines at your feet wither into ash, and the floor darkens into polished obsidian. The heartbeat you heard before grows louder. Slow. Steady. Heavy. From the shadows, a figure emerges. Cloaked, regal, unhurried. His presence doesn't crash upon you like Zeus's thunder or Dionysus's laughter. It simply exists, vast and immovable, like the weight of centuries. This is Hades. He doesn't need to announce himself. His realm speaks for him. You sense it in the hollow air, in the whispers of unseen souls, in the way even your thoughts grow quieter as he steps closer. His crown is dark iron, his robe heavy, trimmed with shadows that seem to move on their own. When his voice comes, it's low, calm, almost too calm. Do you fear endings, or do you see them as beginnings? It's a question that twists deep inside you. Maybe you've feared goodbyes, clung to people or moments as if holding tight could stop the inevitable. Or maybe you've learned that loss, as brutal as it is, sometimes clears space for something new. Hades waits, eyes steady, giving you no hint of which answer he prefers. A historical fact surfaces: Hades was not the devil. Ancient Greeks didn't see him as evil. He was stern, yes, and unyielding, but he ruled the underworld with balance. Scholars still argue whether mortals genuinely feared him or respected him as the unavoidable truth, death, the one appointment no one misses. Here's a quirky detail: Hades owned a helmet called the Helm of Invisibility, a gift from the Cyclopes. Unlike Zeus's lightning bolt or Poseidon's trident, it wasn't about striking, it was about disappearing, about existing in silence. Imagine that, the ruler of the underworld wielding a power not of noise but of absence. He studies you quietly, then asks again, when faced with power, do you seize it, or do you wait for it to come to you? You can't help but think of how Hades rarely left his domain. He didn't roam the skies like Zeus or stir the seas like Poseidon. He ruled what was his, completely, without apology. Maybe his lesson isn't about taking more, but about honoring what you already hold. The obsidian floor shifts beneath you, glowing faintly with rivers of molten gold, like veins running through the dark stone. You sense the souls of the dead nearby, not in torment, not screaming, but murmuring softly, endless voices blending into a single current of existence. Oddly enough, it doesn't feel frightening. It feels steady. Hades tilts his head slightly, and his next question is softer. When you love, do you hold tight, or do you let them walk away? And immediately, Persephone's shadow rises in your mind. The tale of how Hades carried her to his realm, how she ate the pomegranate seeds that bound her to him for part of the year. Scholars still argue whether it was abduction, romance, or something in between. What's certain is that their story reshaped the seasons themselves. Maybe you know that feeling, the ache of wanting someone near, the fear of losing them, the quiet bargain of finding a way to share time instead of owning it. Hades doesn't ask to justify himself. He only asks if you recognize that pull inside yourself. Here's an odd fact: the Greeks often referred to him not by name but with euphemisms like Platon, meaning, the wealthy one, because all riches of the earth, metals, jewels, harvest buried in soil, came from below. Calling him wealthy was safer, gentler, a reminder that what seems grim can also be abundance. The hall darkens further, until only his eyes gleam faintly, steady as coals in a dying fire. He doesn't smile, doesn't frown. He simply watches, waiting to see whether you meet his gaze, or look away. And strangely, you don't feel the urge to run. You feel the urge to stand still, to accept the weight, to realize that not every test is about action. Some are about endurance. The silence deepens again, until it feels like the whole underworld is holding its breath. And then, faintly, another sound begins to stir, soft, echoing notes, the pluck of a lyre. Gentle, mournful, but beautiful. The kind of music that makes even shadows lean closer. The obsidian floor shimmers into a rippling reflection of starlight, and the air warms with memory. Ahead, a figure in flowing robes, carrying a golden lyre, begins to emerge. Apollo, radiant and unyielding, steps from the edge of night into the glow of his own music. The shadows of Hades' hall soften, and the low hum of unseen souls fades into silence. A single note rises, clear and golden, stretching through the stillness like sunlight piercing storm clouds. You turn toward it, and the world shifts. The obsidian floor beneath your feet ripples like water, then steadies into polished marble veined with gold. The air warms, not with the sweetness of Dionysus' wine nor the heaviness of Demeter's harvest, but with clarity, sharp, clean, as if every breath burns away confusion. And then you see him. Apollo. He doesn't stride in with arrogance, though his beauty almost makes it impossible not to. Golden hair catches the faintest glow, his robes flowing like the horizon at dawn. In one hand he holds a lyre, strumming notes that shimmer like sunlight itself. His eyes, steady, piercing, lock on you with a confidence that makes you straighten instinctively. When he speaks, it's melodic, each word smooth as if rehearsed 1,000 times. Do you seek harmony, or do you thrive in chaos? You hesitate, because that's not an easy one. Maybe you crave order, the kind that makes your life feel structured and safe. Or maybe you found yourself most alive in messy, unpredictable moments. Apollo doesn't press. He only plays another note on his lyre, letting the sound linger until you feel the weight of the question. A historical fact flickers through your thoughts. Apollo was worshipped across the Greek world not just as a god of music, but of prophecy, medicine, and light. At Delphi, the most famous oracle spoke in his name, her cryptic words guiding kings and commoners alike. Scholars still argue whether Apollo represented reason itself or whether he balanced reason with mystery, blending clarity and ambiguity into something uniquely divine. Here's a quirky detail: Apollo once challenged a satyr named Marsyas to a musical contest. Marsyas played the flute, Apollo the lyre. The satyr lost, of course, and Apollo, being less than gracious in victory, flayed him alive. Brutal, yes, but it shows Apollo's double edge, patron of beauty, yet merciless in protecting his perfection. His gaze sharpens, and he asks, when you create, do you share, or do you hoard? His words dig deeper than you expect. Maybe you've written, drawn, sung, or dreamed, but kept it tucked away, safe from judgment. Or maybe you've poured it out into the world, vulnerable, hoping someone would see it, understand it. Apollo leans slightly forward, as if daring you to admit which one you've done more. The marble beneath you shifts, blooming into patterns of constellations. The lyre in his hand hums with starlight, and for a moment you're standing beneath a dome of cosmic order, every star a note, every orbit a song. The world feels precise, measured, inevitable. And yet, Apollo himself carries contradictions. He's the god of healing, but also of plague. He brings clarity, yet his oracle often spoke in riddles. He shines with light, but his shadow is sharp. He asks again, softer now, when you pursue truth, do you accept mystery, or do you demand certainty? It's the kind of question that sticks in your chest. Because maybe you've wanted the world to make sense, to be neat, to fit patterns you can understand. But maybe you've also realized that sometimes, truth arrives cloaked in uncertainty, that life isn't a perfectly tuned lyre but something rougher, harder to tame. Another historical fragment surfaces. Apollo was often paired in contrast to Dionysus. Reason versus ecstasy. Order versus chaos. Theater festivals even alternated their worship between the two. Scholars still argue whether this duality was meant as balance or tension, two halves of the human soul forever at odds. And then an odd detail, the Romans associated Apollo with sudden strikes of illness, as if his arrows could cause plague from afar. Imagine it, a radiant god whose golden arrows weren't just weapons of light, but carriers of invisible sickness. A reminder that beauty can wound, that order can cut. Apollo's music softens into silence. He lowers the lyre, and for the first time, he doesn't look untouchable. He looks expectant. Like he's asking you not whether you match him, but whether you've learned that truth, beauty, and creation are as dangerous as they are divine. The golden glow around him begins to fade, replaced by flickers of something sharper, darker, more restless. You hear faint metal scraping, the sound of hammers against anvil, the hiss of fire on iron. The marble veining cracks into glowing molten rivers. The world begins to smell of smoke, ash, and molten bronze. And from the flames ahead, a figure rises, broad-shouldered, limping, sparks clinging to him like stars. Hephaestus, master of fire and forge, is ready to step forward. The golden music of Apollo fades, each note dissolving into silence until only the sound of fire remains. A slow hiss. A sudden crackle. Then the steady, rhythmic pounding of hammer on metal. The marble floor splits, glowing molten beneath your feet, and the air thickens with smoke and the smell of iron. The heat rises, not wild like Dionysus's revelry, but purposeful, focused, shaped. Out of the haze, sparks flare, and from them steps a figure broad and heavy with muscle, a craftsman's body etched by years of work. His beard is dark, his hands blackened with soot, and his gait carries a limp that does nothing to lessen the weight of his presence. Hephaestus. Unlike the other gods, he doesn't glow or sparkle. He doesn't carry the air of someone who expects you to fall in awe. Instead, he carries the dignity of creation itself, the quiet pride of someone who builds the very tools others use to shine. When he speaks, his voice rumbles like stone grinding against stone. Do you measure yourself by what you create, or by how others use it? The question sits heavy. Maybe you've worked hard on something only to see it overlooked, dismissed, or worse, taken for granted. Or maybe your efforts have lifted others higher than yourself, leaving you in the background. Hephaestus knows that sting. After all, he built the weapons of gods, yet few temples were raised for him. A historical fact burns through your thoughts. Hephaestus was thrown from Olympus, by Hera, in some myths, for being born lame, by Zeus, in others, after he defended his mother. He landed in the sea, broken, and only later returned to Olympus with his forge. Scholars still argue whether his story reflects society's unease with disability or whether it symbolized resilience, power born from rejection. And here's a quirky detail: he once trapped his mother, Hera, in a magical throne. When she sat, she couldn't rise. The gods had to beg him to release her. He only agreed after receiving Aphrodite as his wife. Petty? Maybe. Clever? Definitely. It's proof that his mind was as sharp as his hammer. He lifts a half-forged blade from his anvil, its molten edges glowing. When life wounds you, do you harden, or do you reshape? The words sink deeper than the fire's heat. Maybe you've known pain, literal or emotional, that changed the way you moved through the world. Maybe you've built armor around yourself, stronger, heavier. Or maybe you've taken those scars and forged something new, something better, not despite them but because of them. The forge around you glows brighter. Walls of iron rise, etched with carvings of inventions, chains, jewelry, weapons, even thrones. Each hums with power, not their own, but borrowed from the hands that shaped them. Hephaestus doesn't need grandeur, his legacy speaks in every tool, every fire, every spark of ingenuity. He asks again, his eyes catching the firelight, when others overlook you, do you fade, or do you burn brighter in your craft? You feel the weight of it. Because maybe you've been overlooked before, quietly holding things together while someone else took the spotlight. And maybe, like Hephaestus, your true strength wasn't in being celebrated but in knowing what you built mattered, whether anyone thanked you or not. Another fact flickers: Hephaestus crafted the first woman, Pandora, out of clay. With gifts from all the gods, she was both blessing and curse. Scholars still argue whether this myth was meant as cautionary, blaming Pandora for unleashing chaos, or whether it reflected the duality of creation itself, beauty and burden entwined. And then an odd little image surfaces: his workshop wasn't only on Olympus. In some myths, it was inside volcanoes, the earth itself acting as his forge. Imagine that, every eruption, every plume of smoke, not disaster, but divine craftsmanship at work. He lowers the glowing blade back onto the anvil, sparks scattering around his feet. His expression doesn't soften, but it doesn't need to. He's not here to coddle or condemn. He's here to remind you that even brokenness can be remade, that scars aren't shame, they're proof of fire endured. The pounding of his hammer grows softer, fading like an echo in the stone. The glow of molten metal dims, replaced by flickering shadows. You notice the air cooling, the heat retreating, as if the forge has given way to something darker, more instinctual. A low growl stirs in the distance. The shadows shift, sharper, hungrier. You feel the hairs on your arms rise, your body bracing before your mind catches up. Ahead, the hall stretches wide, the ground clawed and scarred, as if beasts have walked here before. And waiting in the half-dark, muscles coiled, eyes burning with restless fire, is Ares, the god of war. The hiss of cooling metal fades, and in its place comes something rawer, iron on iron, the taste of blood in the back of your throat, the restless thrum of battle drums you can't quite hear but feel in your chest. The air is heavier now, thick with tension, like a storm just before lightning cracks. The shadows sharpen into jagged lines across the ground, and every step you take echoes like a march. From the far end of the hall, you hear it first, a growl, low and steady, growing into a roar that vibrates the stone beneath your feet. And then he steps into the light. Ares. Broad-shouldered, bronze-skinned, eyes burning with a fire that doesn't flicker, it consumes. His armor is battered but gleaming, his spear tall enough to pierce the ceiling. Unlike Athena's measured presence, Ares radiates raw force, unfiltered and unrefined. He doesn't wait for respect. He takes it. When he speaks, his voice is iron dragged across stone. Do you fight to win, or do you fight because you must? The question isn't abstract. It lands heavy, because maybe you fought battles, arguments, struggles, inner wars, not out of choice, but because the alternative was worse. Or maybe, uncomfortably, you fought because some part of you wanted to, because conflict can spark something primal, something almost satisfying. A historical fact presses into your thoughts: unlike Athena, who represented strategy, Ares embodied the chaos of war itself. The Greeks respected him, but they didn't love him. In fact, Sparta, a city obsessed with warfare, honored him, but even there, Athena often ranked higher. Scholars still argue whether Ares was feared as a necessary evil or revered as an unstoppable force. And here's a quirky detail: Ares had an affair with Aphrodite, goddess of love. Theirs was passion without disguise, desire without patience. It's almost funny, war and love sneaking around together, caught once in an unbreakable net crafted by Hephaestus. Imagine the gods themselves giggling at the sight of the mighty Ares trapped, humiliated. It shows even war isn't untouchable. His eyes lock on you again, sharper now. When anger rises, do you control it, or do you unleash it? You swallow hard, because maybe you felt both. The times you bottled rage until it ate at you. The times you let it spill out, reckless, destructive, burning bridges you didn't mean to burn. Ares isn't judging, he's pressing. He wants to know whether you fear your fire or wield it. The ground at your feet shifts into dirt, churned as though armies have marched across it. The air fills with phantom shouts, the clash of blades, the cries of the fallen. You realize this isn't just his hall, it's his battlefield, his temple, his truth. And yet, behind the ferocity, you sense something else. Loneliness. Ares, for all his power, was often sidelined. Zeus found him reckless. Athena outshone him in respect. Mortals prayed to him in desperation, not devotion. He is force without polish, passion without praise. And maybe you recognize that in yourself, the parts of you that burn bright but aren't always understood. Another fact surfaces: the Romans embraced him more fully, under the name Mars. To them, he wasn't just destruction but the father of Rome itself. Scholars still argue why the Greeks resisted and the Romans embraced him. Was it cultural values, or simply timing? Either way, it shows how war can be condemned in one place and celebrated in another. An odd little image comes to mind: in some myths, Ares' companions were Phobos, fear, and Deimos, terror, who rode beside him into battle. Imagine living with fear and terror as your constant allies, shadows that never leave your side. It makes you wonder, do you walk with them too, in your own way? Ares steps closer, his spear's tip dragging against the ground, sending sparks into the air. His question comes again, harsher, heavier: do you run from conflict, or do you meet it head-on? The answer doesn't matter to him. What matters is that you know it, that you don't lie to yourself. Because he can smell dishonesty the way others smell smoke. The phantom battlefield begins to fade. The shouts quiet, the dirt stills, and the flames in his eyes dim into embers. He doesn't vanish in triumph, nor in defeat. He simply turns, as if heading into the next war, leaving you with the pulse of adrenaline still hammering in your veins. The silence that follows is almost shocking. Then, soft, gentle as a sigh, you catch the faintest flutter of wings. The air shifts again, this time not with fire or fury, but with the warmth of touch, the sweetness of longing. The stone walls blush into rose hues, and the ground beneath you softens as if woven from petals. From the haze of gold and crimson steps a figure radiant and impossibly alluring. Aphrodite is waiting, and her gaze holds both tenderness and danger in equal measure. The battlefield haze lingers only a moment, then melts like smoke in sunlight. In its place rises the shimmer of foam, pale and glistening, as though the sea itself is breathing beneath your feet. The air sweetens, salt and roses, ocean spray and warm skin. Your heartbeat slows, not because you will it, but because everything around you insists you surrender. A figure steps forward, every movement liquid and unhurried. Aphrodite. Born of sea foam, a goddess who can silence armies with a glance. Her beauty isn't simple, it's layered, dangerous, mischievous, magnetic. She tilts her head slightly, as though already amused by the thoughts crossing your mind. Do you chase love, she whispers, or does love chase you? It's not rhetorical. You feel it, sharp and intimate. Maybe you've been the one always reaching, always searching for connection, bending yourself into shapes for affection. Or maybe you've been the one others orbit around, pursued for reasons you don't fully understand. With Aphrodite, both are true. She is the hunter and the hunted, the prize and the risk. A historical fact glimmers: in classical Athens, Aphrodite had multiple temples and shrines, but one of the most famous was Aphrodite Pandemos, worshipped not just as a goddess of romantic love but of the unity of the people. Scholars still argue whether this common Aphrodite represented a more earthy, physical kind of love, contrasted with a heavenly Aphrodite tied to the soul. It's love split in two, even in divinity. And here's a quirky detail: her sacred animal wasn't just the dove, it was also the goose. Imagine Aphrodite, the radiant goddess of passion, strolling alongside a honking, waddling goose. Not exactly romantic candlelight material. But maybe that's the point: love is never just elegance. Sometimes it's awkward, funny, messy. Her eyes narrow just slightly, glimmering gold. Do you love yourself as much as you demand to be loved? The question stings. Because how many times have you sought someone else to fill the gap you wouldn't fill for yourself? Aphrodite doesn't ask out of cruelty, she asks because she knows the trap. Desire without self-worth becomes desperation. Desire with self-worth becomes power. The space around you shimmers again. You see her entanglements, not hidden but proudly displayed. Ares, the god of war, tangled with her in passion. Hephaestus, the god of craft, bound her in an unbreakable net. Anchises, a mortal, fathered her child Aeneas, the hero destined to found Rome. Her story is messy, complicated, a web of power and betrayal and beauty. And yet, she is never diminished. Even trapped, she made others the fools. Another fact surfaces: Roman culture embraced her fully as Venus, goddess of not just love but of victory itself. Entire families traced their lineage to her, most famously Julius Caesar, who claimed descent from her through Aeneas. Scholars still argue whether this was piety, propaganda, or both. Either way, love became politics, and beauty became empire. She steps closer now, brushing her fingertips lightly against your arm. The touch is soft but electric, like static wrapped in silk. Do you leave people breathless, she teases, or do you trip over your own feet in the attempt? And maybe you laugh, because you've been both. You've had those rare shining moments where your charm landed perfectly, where someone's eyes lingered just a little longer than expected. And you've also had those clumsy disasters: words stumbled, timing wrecked, silence stretched too long. Aphrodite doesn't care. To her, both are part of the game. The ground beneath you ripples like a tide. Petals scatter on invisible waves, and above, you glimpse her chariot drawn not by horses but by swans and sparrows. It's theatrical, over the top, ridiculous, and yet it works. Because love, desire, attraction, it's never subtle. It shouts, even when you try to whisper. The goddess tilts her head once more, lips curved in the faintest smile. You know love can undo you, and yet you reach for it anyway. That is why you are mine. For a moment, you feel dizzy, not with fear, not with fatigue, but with that overwhelming mix of longing and awe. And then, just as suddenly as she arrived, the shimmer of foam and roses begins to recede. The sweet air fades back into the rough tang of fire and stone. Somewhere in the distance, a steady hammer rings against metal, sparking bright in the dim. The ground steadies, solid beneath your feet. The glamour of beauty fades, and in its place comes endurance, patience, creation. You sense the forge before you see it. Hephaestus is waiting. The air grows heavier, warmer, not with the heat of passion, but with the steady pulse of fire harnessed, contained.